Good morning, everyone. My name is Laura Pereira. I'm based here at the Global Change Institute at Wits, and it's my absolute honor and privilege to welcome you all to the first ever combined transformations conference with Earth System Governance. And so I would love to invite Mikhail and Bruce, representing those two communities, to just come up and say a few words of opening before we move into the formal proceedings. Bruce, Mikhail?
It's such a delight to look out over all of you and to think we're here. We finally made it here. For those of you who were here with us last night, when our circle opened up with the Gumboots performance, I think that captured so much of the spirit of what we're doing here today. It was more than a performance. Gumboots is a language of necessity and constraint, way to communicate and connect under challenging circumstances. And I think that's the spirit of our time. And we're here to find that rhythm and find connection between our worlds. And so we live in this time of converging crises, ecological breakdown, backsliding in democracy. I come from the US. It's a bleak situation right now. Enhanced inequalities. Our foundations, our scientific, our institutional foundations, seem to be in stress in ways we didn't even think were possible before. And some of these strains are even captured in a nutshell, in the way that one of our speakers, the Guatemalan campesino leader, wasn't able to join us because of the politically motivated charges he faces. So Leo CORDIO was imprisoned at the airport on the way here to the conference. However, we found out this morning that the charges have almost all been dropped, except for one spurious charge. And there's a plan later this week, at least that's the expectation, that he'll be released and be able to return home, although his travel is still restricted, and he'll have to make a significant bail. So this is good news, but an international pressure from us and from others was thought to be responsible, in part, for his release, and so we're going to keep up the pressure. And so you hear more from us this week to keep Leo CORDIO in our circle. So we'll have an information table, and we'll be taking names, and we'll see if we can participate in some of the fundraising around raising his bail. And in our group photo later this week, we'll show solidarity with him as well. So yeah, destabilization. It's the moment that we live in, isn't it? And we have a temptation to hold on, to rush to solutions, to defend what we have, and we should. But the transformations community is also about, not only being in the collapse and protecting what we can, but thinking about how any time, even the worst of times, might be an opportunity for an opening, a new threshold. So instabilities are frightening, but they might make new possibilities emerge. And so that's kind of what we're about as the transformations community. We're not a conventional academic network, although so many of our members are part of those networks, different networks. We're more cross-cutting. We're a space for those in between, science and practice, policy and place, activism and reflection and good science. We're that in-betweenness, that hybridity is what we're all about. And what binds us together is that we're in relationships with each other. And we support one another, since we're working on the margins is never easy. We give ourselves companionship as well as intellectual support. It's about being together in our whole selves. And ESG, what a great network to be in association with here. The rigor and deep scholarship on governance is, so many of our members draw on this work. So many members are part of both communities. And so to be here together to combine within our communities rigor and creativity and analysis and experimentation, and place and theory is so exciting. I hope this week for us is kind of more like a field station than a conference, where we're here to experiment, try new things. We have a lot of new things that we put on your plate this week, a lot of exciting new ways of interacting through tea labs, through experiments, new kinds of dialogue. So dive in. We want it to be exciting and an opportunity to support one another in experimenting in this work. So slow down, listen across all of our differences and similarities, and sense where the work is going, where your work is going. I think this is an opportunity for sense-making this week, and Laura's going to share some more about some of the sense-making that we've put together. So we have sessions, but we also have arts and plenaries and performance. So the arts are really integrated. They're not a side thing or just some kind of element of performance in between the work. They are the work. So engage with the arts through your senses, your emotions. This is an opportunity to do that in a non-conventional way. We have exhibitions and performances. We have quiet zones as well. So go where your heart tells you to go this week. There are many opportunities, many different paths, and connect, find new insights. So yeah, let's imagine together. Let's connect deeply this week. I'm so excited to be here with you. Look forward to this for so long. There are no easy answers, but let's explore that complexity, and get some clarity about what matters to us and what matters to us as individuals and community. And just a few little things to mention. The Chariots Bar is open late, just so you all know. So we can enjoy into the late hours our companionship. The schedule changes are something to keep an eye on in your Sketch app because the program has not been updated because it's printed. So do keep an eye on schedule changes. We have publications, a number of publication opportunities. So think about whether you might want to participate in those and contact us. You'll see that information in the program. And I'm so looking forward to our Empatheatre performance, which you'll hear more about here. So I'd like now to introduce my partner in this effort, Mikkel Carlsen, who's the new director of the International Project Office of ESG. Welcome. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Bruce. Dear friends, dear colleagues, in times of denial and populist backlash and dismantling of policies and of human decency around the world, I think this conference is not only very timely, it's also very critical. Research matters more than ever, and science-based governance is not an option. It is necessary for human and planetary survival. From mitigating the triple planetary crisis to fostering justice and societal transformations, I think our collective voice reminds the world that science is not a matter of opinion, but a foundation for navigating the very existential dilemma and precarious situation that we are in right now. So when what I would call evil forces seek to silence evidence and reason and detain people, we gather here to do the opposite, to defend truth with help of dialogue, with help of science, with help of art, advocating policy anchored in knowledge. It is in this very spirit that I think the Earth System Governance Project has developed since the early 2000s, today gathering over 600 members around the world in a truly global research collaboration network. And through this conference, we now manifest an inspiring collaboration with the transformations community. I think we share many members under a common umbrella of interest, engagement, and concern. For us, this year also marks another step within the Earth System Governance Project, namely the transfer of the International Project Office to Uppsala University, and we're very honored to have been given the confidence to work on this, supported by the Center of Philanthropies and what's called a Unicorn Initiative at Uppsala University. Building on previous experiences, knowledge, and what the members in the network think, we will now develop a new science and implementation plan for the coming years. We will foster the 9-mission agenda. We will push for transdisciplinarity. We will push for transformative governance. And we will celebrate 20 years in the network. Thanks to Bruce Goldstein, Laura Pereira, and Kayla Tienhar, who can't be here today. This conference offers us an opportunity to build forward, to build further on all this here in Johannesburg. So I think let us use this conference to learn, to challenge, and to inspire each other. Let us continue to prove that science matters, that governance matters, and that people and the planet matter, and that together we can help shaping a more just and more sustainable future. So on behalf of ESGP, welcome all of you.
Bruce, Michael, thank you so much for those opening words. Ladies and gentlemen, honored delegates, welcome to South Africa. It's the first time that the Transformations Conference has been on the African continent. Earth System Governance did hold a conference in Kenya a couple of years ago. Wits University, the Global Change Institute where I'm based, is the local host. We were absolutely thrilled to be able to work with both the Transformations community and the Earth System Governance team through Bruce and Kylo, who unfortunately can't be with us today, to put this event together. I think someone has walked off with my notes of CVs. Yes, that might be it. Thanks, Bruce. Always, I mean, I could have made up a few accolades, but probably best not to do that. So it is my absolute honor to actually ask the Vice Chancellor of Wits University to welcome you all on behalf of the university. So Professor Zeblon Vilakazi assumed the role of Vice Chancellor and Principal at Wits University in January 2021, following his tenure as Vice Principal and DVC of Research. He has done a variety of very interesting and important research, particularly in having transitioned to academia, where he has spearheaded it from 1999, South Africa's inaugural experimental high-energy physics research group, focusing on the CERN-ALICE experiment at the Large Hadron Collider. Very exciting. In May 2022, Professor Vilakazi was elected as a Fellow of the Royal Society of London, joining a prestigious cohort of scientists. His induction into this esteemed academy aligns him with luminaries in the field, including Basil Schonland and Philip Tobias, who was also mentioned last night, I think, by the Dean of Science. Professor Vilakazi's trajectory reflects a commitment to excellence in research, education, and global scientific collaboration. And I think it's in that spirit that I welcome him on stage to give us a few words from the university. Thank you.
Program Director, Professor Laura Pereira, and congratulations to all and the team at the Global Change Institute for pulling this, I think, first of its kind in South Africa. The Deputy Director General for Climate Change and Air Quality Management at the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment, Dr. Maesela Kekana. Ms. Mpume Mthombeni, co-founder of Empatheatre, Dr. David Obura, Chair of the IPBES and Director of CORDIO East Africa. Welcome to South Africa. And also like to welcome Dr. Dylan McGarry, scholar, activist, and pracademic multimedia artist. Distinguished guests, members of the diplomatic corps, colleagues from the transformation community and the Earth Systems Governance Project. My name is Zeblon Vilakazi. I'm the Vice Chancellor and Principal of the University of the Witwatersrand, known by its name, Wits, and the home of our alumnus, Nelson Mandela, whose career was shaped here, if in case you don't know. So it's a pleasure on behalf of the university to welcome you all to Johannesburg for the 7th biennial conference on the transformation community in partnership with Earth Systems Governance Project. It truly is an historic moment. For the first time, the community gathers here in Johannesburg, in South Africa. What a better place than here, Johannesburg, the beating heart of Africa. Africa's most complex urban conurbation with all the exciting opportunities and the challenges that, among others, of course, talk about governance, sustainability, and climate change therein, because it is at this city more than 100 years ago that the most complex industrial system ever established in this continent came out of here. And of course, it came at a huge cost in terms of the environment and of course, socio-politically, that you all know about. So this city has been shaped by deep histories of struggle and resilience. It continues to reinvent itself as a hub of culture, innovation, and justice. If you get the opportunity, visit some of our landmarks like the Apartheid Museum, the Museum Africana, the Market Theatre, because there's a lot of performance here, and also, of course, the Cradle of Humankind, just west of Johannesburg. In fact, you are here at the home of humanity, where it all began. So actually, we are talking about the story about the survival of humanity in this period of what is known as the polycrisis, where reason, science, and logic is now no longer a de rigueur of thinking, but actually stories, news come as reason. I'll take a leaf from a famous Russian scientist, I think Soviet, because it was Ukraine at the time, when there was the Chernobyl challenge. Well, obviously, ideology tried to override science. But this nuclear scientists knew that the problem was because of the technical design faults of that reactor. I mean, it was shown in many movies. But one thing I like about that documentary that was screened about Chernobyl was the last part of his presentation. I think the two previous speakers spoke about that assault on enlightenment, assault on science through ideology. He said, and I'm going to not phrase properly here, excuse me, science knows no religion, no ideology, no belief. Science is about the search for the truth. You might lie and deny the truth, but truth will always be out there, waiting to be discovered. It will not lie. So despite all our obfuscations and denial and overriding science with stories and fake stories, the truth will be out there. And the truth is that we are living in a world of dramatic changes, driven by all the interventions that we've come up with as a human species over the last 400 years, and that have changed the world. And therefore, for us to ensure that our children, grandchildren, and generations that come after us inherit a world that will make sure is a better place for them to thrive and survive. In one quotation as well I take from a fellow physicist, actually, an astronomer, Carl Sagan, when we had the Voyager that was launched in 1977, and then subsequently just before he passed on in the early 1990s, when the Voyager took the last glimpse of planet Earth from afar. The Earth appears like a mote of dust in the vast darkness of everything. And then what he said was, Carl Sagan, I'm sure you all know, was a famous science popularizer. He said, just look at this pale blue dot. It's the only home you know. Everything you've known, you've loved, you've cherished. All the masters of their time have come and gone. From the great lords, dukes, warriors, kings, dictators, every philosopher, every creative has lived on this tiny mote of dust we call planet Earth. It appears very blue and fragile. Imagine how fragile it is. It's the only place we know. This is where we as humanity make our last stand. It's often said that astronomy is a humbling experience. So it's important that this message gets re-emphasized now, that political hubris cannot overcome the fact that we only have one home, our place that we only have, and there's no way out. We have to make our last stand here. And you guys are starting that process of making our last stand here against the gravity of what we've seen is forces of unreason. But light will come through and refract through all lies and will emerge as our guiding lodestone to what will be a better planet. So you are doing an amazing job in that regard. I do wish you well. So this week's conversations are framed around the 4 important themes: how we bridge and bond across worldviews, most importantly in these difficult times; how culture and learning can unlock new pathways of living sustainably; how we can respond to disruptive changes. We are living in a world of disruptions, the disruptions posed by the rapid advances in artificial intelligence and the potential new disruptive technologies like quantum computing, and I'm guilty as charged, having been part of that in my younger life. But you have to harness these disruptive changes for us to be able to manage our global polycrisis. As I said, how we respond to them, whether technologically, politically, economically, socially, culturally, as broader humanity. Most importantly, how we defend democracy and multilateralism in a world where they are under immense pressure. Looking at today's program, I'm struck by the richness of voices gathered here, from government to science, from the arts to civil society. I want to especially acknowledge our distinguished speakers, Mr. Kekana, Ms. Mthombeni, Dr. Obura, and Dr. McGarry. Each brings a unique lens. Together, they remind us that transformation is never the work of one sector alone, but it requires partnerships. As I close, I'd like to end with a quotation by an ancient sage, Pliny the Elder. But before I do that, let me say that on behalf of the university, I wish you an inspiring discussion, fruitful collaborations, enduring friendships, crossing of borders in a world where boundaries are being built. Welcome to Wits, welcome to Johannesburg, and welcome to TCESG. Now back to Pliny the Elder. Ex Africa, semper aluquid novi. There's always new coming out of Africa. Welcome to Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that. And let's see how many languages we can actually get up on this podium, if we've already gotten some Latin in there. Thank you so much, Professor Vilakazi. It is now my absolute pleasure to invite Maesela Kekana up to give a welcome from the South African government perspective to the conference. Mr. Kekana is the Deputy Director General of Climate Change and Air Quality Management in our Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment. He serves as South Africa's chief negotiator in multilateral environmental agreements and has represented the country in the African Union, the Major Economies Forum and other international platforms, serving as the national focal point to the UNFCCC as well as the IPCC, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with in the room, and managing linkages with other global environmental agreements. He joined government in 2006 through the Department of Trade and Industry, where he advanced green economy initiatives and environmental standards in industry. In 2009, he moved to the Department of what was then Environmental Affairs, shaping South Africa's negotiating positions for international climate change fora. What's not on his bio that he also sits on the board of the Global Change Institute at Wits, which is a very, very prestigious, at least for Francois and I's perspective. He currently chairs the G20 Environment, Climate and Sustainability Working Group, fostering global cooperation for sustainable and inclusive growth. My absolute pleasure to invite Mr. Kekana up on stage.
Good day, distinguished guests, Vice Chancellor Professor Vilakazi, esteemed academics, practitioners, members of society, colleagues, partners, and representatives from universities and research institutions across continents, the conference co-host, Transformations Community, the Earth System Governance Project, and the University of the Witwatersrand. It is an honor to be here today to engage with you at the 7th Biennial Conference, which is hosted for the first time on African soil. As you will deliberate on the conference theme, Navigating Sustainability Transformations Towards Justice and Equity, let us be reminded of the need for the scientific community to contribute to evidence-informed policy decisions and implementation that gears us towards a more inclusive and equitable global society. My intention today is not to recite the science. Your expertise already anchors this gathering. Rather, I wish to highlight some of the climate change policy knowledge gaps and priorities, and to encourage collaborative knowledge co-production. As a scientific community, you already have knowledge base on key climate, biodiversity, and sustainability science. It is important that you exchange scientific knowledge to inform policy and practical solutions. This conference is one of the ways for us to foster the science policy practice interface. In that regard, it is also about how you inclusively produce scientific knowledge. For example, the action research approach that this community utilizes is valuable as it promotes the co-production of evidence and knowledge with the society and policy makers. In doing so, there is a better chance of producing policy-relevant, actionable solutions for sustainability transformations and transitions. South Africa's Climate Change Act of 2024 embodies this commitment. It envisions a just transition towards a low-carbon climate resilience and ecologically sustainable economy and society, one that eradicates poverty, fosters social inclusion, and creates decent work. Crucially, the Act mandates that climate mitigation and adaptation measures be informed by evolving scientific evidence and best available knowledge. Globally, the IPCC and IPBES remains essential platforms for knowledge exchange. African scientists are increasingly contributing to these assessments, and these scientists are actively engaging with policymakers and practitioners. As we all know, the preparations for various IPCC global assessment reports in the Assessment Report 7th cycle is underway. It is vital that our science finds its way into these global reports to shape the knowledge base. In South Africa, we already have successful national and global science policy practice interface initiatives which we can build from. Through our collaboration with the University of Cape Town, we are working on updating South Africa's nationally determined contribution to fulfill the mandate under the Paris Agreement. We therefore look forward to the policy-relevant deliberations and research outputs you will have under the conference sub-theme that will engage on issues of democracy and multilateralism. Through our collaboration with researchers at Wits University's Global Change Institute, we can engage with the crucial climate change science. This includes our understanding of the reality of the changing extreme weather patterns and vulnerabilities that South Africa and the continent at large are experiencing. We appreciate the GCIS research on positioning Africa in terms of planetary futures. Furthermore, scholars from Stellenbosch University Center for Sustainability Transition are already utilizing embedded research methods to address socio-ecological and socio-technical system change, where researchers are placed in various institutions over a period of time to promote the co-generation of knowledge in the real-world setting where change is needed. There are many other global science policy partnerships that we look forward to hearing from over the next few days and beyond. These examples illustrate the value of partnerships in advancing knowledge and practice. As a transdisciplinary community, your deliberations will contribute to bridging the understanding between sustainability transitions and sustainability transformations across multiple sectors. For the scientific community, it matters conceptually whether the reference is made to sustainability transformation or sustainability transition. In practice, what matters is the bridge that helps us to, as policymakers, to understand the interconnections between various systems that are undergoing change simultaneously and inform our policy responses that can accelerate these transformations and transitions towards sustainable economies and society. We need evidence to best understand the alignment between innovations, policy, politics, markets, and the rules of the game. Transitions and transformations are inherently disruptive and bring with them change away from unsustainable practices and systems. These systems are often interconnected, including on socio-ecological, socio-technical, socio-economic, and socio-political dynamics that collectively inform our sustainable development path. Your deliberations through the conference sub-theme on disruptive change should bring about our understanding of complementarities, contradictions, and solutions around co-evolutionary change in these systems. Climate change adaptation and mitigations cut across multiple sectors. As we engage with sustainability transformations and transitions research, let us produce actionable knowledge that addresses interconnected just transition challenges, including in energy, transport, agriculture, industry, forestry, built environment, human settlements, water, biodiversity, and ocean systems. From an African perspective, research must also address subnational implementation, adaptation scenarios, climate resilient society, urban resilient infrastructure, urban innovation, ecosystem-based climate resilience, climate finance, climate mitigation trajectories, as well as the industry greenhouse gas emission mitigation. The conference sub-themes on bridging and bonding and on transformative culture and learning are important to promote transdisciplinary action, research methods, and processes. Some of the key areas we are interested in understanding these themes relates to addressing the decolonization of research knowledge production and dissemination. In other words, how best to be inclusive of other forms of knowledge systems from members of society, practitioners, and policy makers. Furthermore, the world is faced with increasing use of artificial intelligence. We need to find ways to better understand it and effectively work with it in a way that improves our critical thinking, societal transformations, and a just transition. It remains imperative to strengthen collaboration and knowledge sharing between government, academia, and members of society to achieve evidence-based solutions that will bring about practical and transformative solutions that embrace a just and inclusive approach. Let us seize this moment to reaffirm our global commitment to knowledge co-production, knowledge that drives evidence-informed transformations and transitions towards just low carbon, climate resilience, and ecological sustainable futures. On behalf of the government of South Africa and my department, I wish you well in these important science policy practical deliberations, and I thank you.
Thank you so much for those words, Mr. Kekana. It's clear that there's a lot of linkages of the work and the discussions that we're going to be having over the coming days for governments, the South African government, but I think governments around the world who are looking to address this polycrisis that has been mentioned. So I've always wanted to say, all protocols observed, and I think they now have been, we're now going to transition into the second part of this opening plenary. And it's my absolute honor and privilege to be able to introduce both Dr. Dylan McGarry and Mpume Mthombeni. Dylan practices across the fields of education, sociology, ecology, and the arts. And as such, Dylan works with several tentacles touching the world as an educational sociologist, culture ecologist, multimedia artist, artivist, curator, theatre, and filmmaker. As the co-founder of Empatheatre, Dylan's work and praxis draws from the power of public storytelling as a mechanism for regenerative community building. Dylan holds 2 2023 National Social Science and Humanities Awards for Best Curated Exhibition and Best Digital Humanities Output, along with various other awards, and his exhibition Empathetic Apprentice just won the Best Art Installation at the Fisheries Festival last month. Mpume Mthombeni is an award-winning stage and film actor, theatre maker, researcher, facilitator, and story healer who hails from Umlazi, Durban. Mthombeni has taken on multiple roles over the years in theatre, radio, film, and television, drawing international acclaim. And in 2014, she co-founded Empatheatre. She's just finished a year-long tour playing Zenzile Maskeo in Empatheatre's acclaimed and sold-out production of Zeblon the Fire Eater, which was showcased across South Africa and into the Netherlands, Germany, and Switzerland. In June 2023, he was invited to give a speech at the UN World Oceans Day at the United Nations headquarters in New York, and she'll be returning there next month to offer live performances around the BB&J agreement. It's now my pleasure to please shift into this next session. Thank you.
Odlala bo bayeza bangoma baphumolwa ndle odlala sangoma odlala bo bayeza bangoma baphumolwa ndle odlala tsombeni odlala ngoma bayeza bangoma baphumolwa ndle odlala bo bayeza odlala bo bayeza bangoma baphumolwa ndle. Yebo ngani yami. Kungani unendaba kangaka ngolwandle thisha wami? Ngisayintombazanyana. Ugogo wami wayengexoxela indaba ukuthiwa indlela yokuphila. Ugogo wami wayeyisangoma elapha ngesintu. Wayeholwa amazwi okhokho bakhe ababekhuluma kuyena emaphusheni akhe. Ngiyakhumbula ngimbuza ukuthi kungani amadlozi ehlala olwandle gogo? Wonke umuntu unesikhathi sakhe kulomhlaba. Uma isikhathi sifika sibuyela kokhokho bethu endaweni yakhokho okuwulwandle. Ngemva kokuthi umndeni wakho ukumbele ngaphansi komhlaba, imvula iqindezela umzimba wakho bese ikhama umphefumulo wakho uze uzalele ezweni lamaphupho lapho ubhukuda khona kumfudlana omncane uba ngubantu nomfudlana. Njengedlozi elisalincane ulalela ingoma yokuphila womfula bese ukhumbula ubuntu baleyo ndawo. Ubhukude wehle njalo ngomfula ulandela izingoma zogogo abadala akubakubiza ekujuleni kolwandle. Ugeleze wehle njalo msukulu wami, wehle njalo ukhule ukhumbule uba ngubantu nomfula, umuntu wasemfuleni. Uyabona mzukulu, yonke imindeni nezizwe zabantu zixhumene ngezibongo ezehlukene, imindeni yemimoya. Isibongo sethu thina umkhomo. Uma ufika lapho umfula uhlangana khona nolwandle, welula umoya wakho bese uthatha izinkumbulo zomhlaba nzukulu bese uthatha izinkumbulo zomhlaba bese ucula zonke izingoma zesizwe msukulu msukulu wami olwande kukhulu ongakufunda futhi kukhulu ongahlola kuyindawo ebanzi futhi ecishe ingapheli yemfihlakalo izimfihlo ulwazi kanye nezimangaliso ubhukude wehle njalo ujule ulandele izingoma zogogo badala uma ufika kumthombo wengoma ufica ogogo abadala bahlala khona uma uqala ukufika basuke belinda ukwamukela ngothando olujulile bazokwazi kahle ukuthi uyingane kabani uhlangatshezwa ngukhokho wakho ekulindile ekhamise kakhulu lapho ungena uba idlozi elikhulu idlozi lasemanzini wamukela izimfundiso amaculo kanye namaphupha abantu bakithi msukulu uyokwazi sonke lesimfihlo kodwa ke le imfihlo yangesinye isikhathi uhlala laphaya isikhathi eside kuze kube ngolunye usuku lapho izindaba zabantu emhlabeni zicindezela futhi udinga ukwabelana ngolwazi lwakho uzwa ingoma entsha ingoma kamama omusha olandelayo ubhukude njalo uziyofika ezwini lakho uze untante uphume ngaphezulu kwamanzi uthathwe yifu likubuyisele ezweni egcineni umphefumulo wakho une ezweni umama wakho olandelayo akuphuze laphaya olwandle elincane eswini sakhe uyakhula ukhule bese uzalwa kabusha niyabona ke bantabami leli izulu wonke umuntu afuna ithikithi elilodwa lokuya kuya alikho lapho izithunywa zevangeli ezithembise khona cha liphansi laphaya ngaphansi kwamagagasi Siyabonga. My name is Mpume Mthombeni. I was born and raised in Umlazi in Durban, in a township. I am a healer, a sangoma. I use words and stories like this one to heal. I remember when I was young, I used to visit sangomas in the neighborhood, and they would teach me how to dance. They would teach me how to beat the drum, teach me how to learn from my dreams. I remember one old sangoma telling me how people would go twasa in the sea, how they would be carried by a cloud into the sea, towards their ancestors. How did they get into the sea? This question has stuck with me my entire life. This film you've just seen emerged from this question. And together with many people, it took us 5 years to create this 5 minutes. Yeah, it was made by staying in constant dialogue, calling and responding with customary knowledge holders, sangomas, artists, musicians, opera singers, composers, marine scientists, lawyers, small-scale fishers, children, policymakers, educators, activists, and of course, our ancestors. I could have never imagined answering this question through our theatre methodology, Empatheatre. But that the answers would keep flowing with new understanding like the tides and phases of the moon. Over the last decade, our public storying has created amphitheaters of empathy, extra-legal tribunals where we can bring together different ways of knowing, being, and doing, and make new decisions, create new laws and policies in different contexts. This film emerged from our play Lalela Ulwandle, Listen to the Sea, which has democratized research. Following this same principle of call and response, which my fellow Dr. Dylan, my fellow colleague, Dr. Dylan McGarry calls a pedagogy of echolocation. Like the whales, we echolocated, calling and responding with all kinds of different people in all kinds of different contexts. It has taught up and down our coastline. We performed to everyday citizens, to decision makers, and even performed at international policy events like the COP27 in Egypt, the headquarters of FAO in Rome, and the UN in New York. Our plays and films have been used as policy briefs. We have performed to Parliament and even used as evidence in court cases. In 2022, it was used in court against big oil companies and ministries of minerals and energy who are selling our ocean without our consent, without thinking of our ancestors. This was the first time art was used as evidence of intangible heritage of our fellow indigenous fishers and coastal peoples. And they won their case against big oil. But these struggles continue and are far from over. Soon after this conference, later this month, I will be presenting this film and our work to the United Nations Biological Diversity of Areas Beyond National Jurisdiction Policy to support a global movement of indigenous peoples' protection of the deep sea from extractive industry. With each iteration, and more citizens and their ancestors are able to add their voice and contribute to our research. What we've learned throughout these whole processes is that for real transformation to occur, we must align with the storytellers, the healers and lovers of our earth, our ocean, with our ancestors. The climate crisis is a crisis of culture. We have gotten into this mess because we have not listened to the stories of the ancient ones, of indigenous communities, and of the people who know how to live well with all of our ecological family, human and more than. Listen to those who speak in praise poems, who make images, who sing, who follow their ancestors' dreams and memories, who choose to dance rather than to march, who can speak to the ocean and also know how to listen to her in return. Our stories are the sacred medicine, umuthi, that transformative research and decision-making needs. Storytelling and story listening dissolves the barriers and disconnections between disciplines and departments. It sculpts new evidence, new ways of making meaning with the ocean and each other. Storytelling ensures we learn from our past and make better decisions moving forward. Siyabonga. Hageni fume, fumela nitsongolika ba. Hageni fume, fumela nitsongolika ba. Hageni fume, fumela nitsongolika ba. Hageni fume bo, fumela nitsongolika ba.
Siyabonga, Mpume, for that incredible performance. It's now a hard act to follow, but it's also my pleasure to welcome Dr. David Obura onto stage. He currently chairs the Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. He's the founding director of CORDIO East Africa, a knowledge organization supporting sustainability of coral reef and marine systems in the Western Indian Ocean, and is on the Earth Commission. His current research and policy engagement seeks to foster collective action to promote sustainability across all scales. He was awarded Kenya's National Honor, Moran of the Burning Spear, in December 2021, and the Coral Reef Conservation Award of the International Coral Reef Society in 2022. And I can't think of a better person to ask to reflect and to share from the scientific community's perspective engagement with what we've just heard from Mpume. So thank you so much, David.
Okay, thank you very much, Laura. I'm never going to accept an invitation to speak from Laura again, because now I'm going to kill you with a PowerPoint. So my apologies for that. So it's a real privilege to stand up here in the plenary and present from the journey that I have come on, I suppose, in terms of my background and now the role that I have now as a chair of IPBES. Gives me the great privilege of projecting out from the findings and the voices of many different people, science, but other knowledge systems as well, which I'll get to talking about. And hopefully more and more that we integrate this work, but they're increasingly coming forward in our messaging as well, as we just heard from Mpume, the incredible stories, the narratives that come from multiple voices. I've woven together a title from the words for this conference, because, you know, these are the various issues that we're talking about: transformations, equity, and justice. I'll borrow a little bit from Dylan McGarry's work as well, in terms of being intentional about positionality as well. And this is something we generally have not done as natural scientists, because we have generally come from the same position, but of course realizing there are multiple voices. And I use this photo of myself with a coral from this was a New York Times Magazine cover photo. And this was in late 2023 that this issue came out. And this emphasized to me the importance of voice and positionality, of holding a dead coral, talking about coral bleaching and the pressures that we're facing now in the world and climate change, and of systems disappearing because of our actions, pointing to root causes. So rather than feeling anxiety and so on about this, which of course many of us feel, but real sort of anger about what's happening and the need to really point to the root causes and those people who have agency to really shift this and move it. Where I come from, I'm Kenyan. I've been working in the Western Indian Ocean on coral reefs since the early 90s. Of course, coral reefs are beautiful ecosystems. They're very important for the livelihoods of coastal communities all up and down our coastlines and of course around the world in tropical regions. But they're declining rapidly. And from a point of frustration and seeing that these graphs, some of you will have seen these are graphs of biodiversity decline. The bottom one, of course, is business as usual. The yellow line there shows all the conservation and restore actions we might do in the biodiversity and conservation communities. If we implemented them fully, we still wouldn't get back to a point of nature positive or back to where things were at the beginning. So when this graph was done, that bifurcation or trifurcation point is 2010. So we need actions on economy, basically production and consumption levels, to get to the green curve and back. My coral reef systems, the burning embers from the IPCC, of course many are familiar with that depiction. We are already at 1.5 degrees, at a point of close to no return, perhaps for most coral reefs around the world, of losing 70 to 90% of coral reefs. We are at 1.5 degrees now. We're feeling that those temperatures on an annual basis now. For the IPCC, we need a 20-year average, but we're blowing past that limit very quickly now. And the causation is this world map at the top on GDP. As much as we focus on conservation in the best and remaining places, the important places for biodiversity and for people and for communities, if we're not dealing with the drivers and the root causes, this tsunami of pressures will continue to pick up and expand. And I've come to be convinced over the last 10 years in looking at this that actually the solutions are very much local. So this space in the center of the circle here, the impacts are felt locally on biodiversity and on people, but the solutions also need to be local as well. And the Sustainable Development Goals and the sustainability paradigm, I think, are the powerful. This is where the power is in policy around the world. But unfortunately, the framings have not been as strong as they could be, and I've been working a lot on that, and you'll see that woven through the things that I talk about now. So in terms of the talk that I'll give a quick introduction to IPBES, the framings that we have, but also how I think these framings can strengthen our understanding of the sustainable development paradigm, sustainability. I'll then mention briefly the Nexus and Transformative Change Assessments, which we approved in Windhoek in December 2024. So they're our latest assessments. I was a co-chair of the Nexus assessment until I became the chair of the platform, and I had to pull back from that. We have many transformation assessments, transformative change assessment authors in the conference. You'll hear about it a lot. So Karen O'Brien, one of the 3 co-chairs, is here. There are many coordinating lead authors and authors as well. I won't present this report in detail because they will do it at various points and I will get it wrong. I won't say it as well as they can. But the privilege I have as chair is that I get to now skirt across the tops of many of our assessments and try and integrate them together and also pull into them to pull out the nuggets that can really help connect across them in various contexts. And then I'll go into sort of what direction transformations, again, being very intentional about positionality from Africa and working on a global ecosystem that is amongst the first to disappear because of climate change and overconsumption, particularly in developing regions, and using pieces from the assessments. And in this case, I find that it's really powerful to really pull out the 3 underlying causes that the transformative change assessment identified, and I'll sort of skim through those in my ecologist framing, so I apologize if I don't say things very well from a social science perspective, because that's where these underlying causes really sit. But this is where I also try and translate from our assessments into words and language that could be communicated perhaps much more quickly and succinctly in policy context, in business context, in finance context as well. So this is very much an exploration from me, and I look forward to hearing your feedback on how you think this goes. So IPBES, we're Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. And our mission, like the IPCC, sort of our larger and older sibling, is to strengthen knowledge foundations for better policy through science. And so to bring the sciences into decision-making contexts. We're established in 2012, we're quite young. We now have 150 member states. The most recent to join was Rwanda about 2 months ago, which is great. Having many more African countries are joining now. And our secretariat is administered by UNEP and is headquartered in Bonn. I'm also really pleased to, as many people know this already, but to announce that we have had an executive secretary, Anne Larry-Goderie, for about 10 years. She's shepherded IPBES through its formative phases. We now have a new executive secretary who is Lutando Dziba from South Africa, who many of you know, who's a great person for leading our ship into the next 10 years and across 2030, which of course is a critical point in time. Our primary work is assessments. We have now produced 13 of them and 2 workshop reports. 4 more are coming out before 2030, maybe a 5th one. We've yet to decide on that through our plenaries. But really, this is the work that we have been done, and this is work done by scientists. One thing I also realized being chair is I'll ask in a room like this, so who in this room has actually been in an IPBES assessment or a task force? Please just raise your hands, and indeed, there's a lot of people here who have been very much a part of IPBES processes. And that's where our strength comes from, is from the knowledge foundations that go into our assessments, our task forces and the work, and then also the national focal points that we have and the engagement. We often have URLs to try and find the assessments, but really if you Google IPBES and the keywords in an assessment name, you can find them quite easily. So please do, they're very powerful documents. We have a conceptual framework which was developed in 2015, which helps us to organize all this knowledge synthesis and integration. And I'll highlight a couple of key points of that. So one is the nature's contributions to people. This is really broadening out the concepts from the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment to 18 classes. I'll come back to this a little bit. We quantified direct drivers of biodiversity decline in the global assessment in great detail, but then a lot of the juice is in that central part, the social, the governance, the institutional parts in the middle. And then the other part that is really important, that I've already mentioned, is we really integrate knowledge systems so that we have very strong procedures now for including people from indigenous communities, knowledge holders, experts that know these knowledge systems and can help integrate these into the assessment work that we do. Now, the Sustainable Development Paradigm is the decision-making framework that the globe has really adopted as its principal sort of integrated framework. I think everybody knows it very well. Nature, economy, and society. And I depict it this way for particular reasons. I do want to sort of just point out there's a lot of framing now around bioeconomy, particularly with the G20, with the presidencies of the G20 with Brazil last year and currently South Africa. I think it's been really important that the last 4 presidencies have been emerging economies, so Indonesia, India, Brazil, and South Africa. Really the potential for the countries of the future, to be honest, to be really leading thinking in the G20 forward, to be much more inclusive. And the idea of bioeconomy has come through very strongly. You may have of course, individual terms can be very complicated about who translates them in different ways. When you look at the words that are used in the high-level principles of the bioeconomy that Brazil put together, South Africa is taking forward, you see all the components and the terms that we use in sustainable development, that we use in our IPBES framings and so on. So I think there's a lot of power in this framing when you look at it more generally. And when we add some of the key components from IPBES framings into that sustainable development paradigm of nature, economy, and society, the important thing here is to focus on, now there are many, especially indigenous and other worldviews that don't see economy and society as separated from nature. And we have just heard of that, beautifully expressed by Mpume just now in the narrative that she expressed. What this does express is the narrative that's in the dominant worldview that is destroying the planet, basically, the one that needs to be changed. So this is not trying to describe everybody should think about nature, economy, and society in this way, but if we're trying to deal with the root causes of the triple planetary crisis that we're dealing with now, they basically come from this worldview, and this is a worldview that needs to balance economic desires with nature and society, which currently is not happening. So this is a way to sort of pull that dominant worldview towards a sustainability paradigm that's more consistent with others. So here, I'll just follow that through a little bit more explicitly, coming back to some of the framings from IPBES. And if you put nature, economy, and society in these relationships and look at the nature's contributions that are increasing from the global assessments in 2019, these are the contributions from nature that we commoditize in our economic systems. We maximize their production, and it's that maximizing that is driving the decline in every other component of nature. So our economic systems take those, impose direct drivers on the rest of nature, and we get those declines. When you come to climate change, we have now started to try and maximize carbon sequestration, another contribution from nature. If we do it from the same mindset, we will equally sort of impact on nature, which has been very well demonstrated in narrowly constructed carbon sequestration projects. And this, in fact, identifies for the Nexus and Transformative Change assessments sort of the challenges that they took on. It wasn't done from this framing, but this is essentially how the thinking for those 2 assessments emerged. They were done at the same time. So the Nexus assessment was trying to look at balanced solutions and co-benefits across multiple NCP or ecosystem service classes in the different sectors. The Transformative Change assessment was trying to look at transformation of economic systems and the mindsets behind those. Just to go into the 2 assessments very briefly now a little bit. So the Nexus assessment looked at the interlinkages between biodiversity, food, water, health, and climate change. You can recognize these are 2 nature sectors at the bottom, 3 economic sectors above those, and the complex interlinkages amongst those. Identified response options. Sorry, that's a bit fuzzy now. But the response options identified basically The second column there in the code identifies what sector one of these responses comes from. So the top one, biodiversity, area-based conservation, is good for biodiversity, but you can identify co-benefits from a response option in one sector. You can identify synergistic benefits to other sectors as well, and went through 70 of these that were well documented in the literature. This is what assessments do. They look at the knowledge that's out there already, as opposed to necessarily identifying the best thing. And so these detailed responses are very important to find. I'm being told I have to rush through a little bit. Nexus-wide benefits, looking into the future, what the Nexus assessment also identified, which from the literature, that scenarios looking forward into the future, those business as usual ones, of course, end up having very negative outcomes across the 5 elements that it looked at. There are a number of scenarios in the literature, focusing on food or conservation or climate change. Those can have positive outcomes for their focal areas, but negative outcomes in others. But positive outcomes are possible projected into the future from the literature if you focus across multiple sectors, but you need to do that very intentionally. And this is where transformative change is needed to be able to do this more effectively. And then coming to the transformative change assessment. So the beginning, I'll only touch on the beginning part of the transformative change assessment, identifying from the global assessment in 2019 that looked at direct and indirect drivers, and then values and behaviors weren't really touched on, influencing indirect drivers. The transformative change assessment identified 3 underlying causes that really drive the current systems of overexploitation. So disconnection from and domination over nature and people, concentration of power and wealth, and prioritization of short-term individual and material gains. These, of course, are strongly related to each other, but they are somewhat different. And what they do is they lock in these sort of syndromes, which are called challenges in the assessment, of sets of indirect drivers that are listed on the right over here. And this is where my frustration in the conservation community came from, is that, the first one relates to nature, but all the others are social and economic, of these real challenges that we have to address, the solutions we need to find. So leaping forward. So just connecting the 2 assessments together in a way, the Nexus assessment is a bottom-up approach to this model of sustainable development. The transformative change assessment is a top-down approach looking at these, and they connect in the middle. Where does one begin and the other end? It'll depend a lot from one place to another. Now, coming to the underlying causes at the end, another assessment that was really important, increasingly, I think, in trying to communicate what we need to do and why, was the values assessment, which identified that there are cultures within and among countries hold many different worldviews. As I said at the beginning, this model of nature, economy, and society is very much that instrumental worldview of living from nature, of maximizing traded commodities out from nature, which ends up having impacts on nature, and also because of the short-term material gain and inequalities, of course, undermines social systems as well. We really need to think much more broadly about other values of nature. And the importance of focusing on this worldview is that because it's taking up too much space on the planet, we need to reduce the amount of space it takes up, the amount that it consumes, in order to make space for the other worldviews to coexist as well. Finance, a very quick word on this because it's really what is driving the system right now, short-term material gain. If you think about global GDP, about $105 trillion, 55% of it is highly to moderately dependent on nature. Large part, 6.7 trillion, is nature negative from the literature. The Nexus assessment identified about 20 trillion of nature negative activities. So this is impact from one sector or another that imposes costs on others. If you look at the nature positive aspects of the global economy, current biodiversity funding, a very small proportion of overseas development assistance and philanthropy, nature-based solutions as well. Biodiversity funding gap, that's a gap, so it's red. The thing is, what we're trying to do is to balance these greens and reds, right? And the reds are so much larger than the greens. So it won't come from direct finance, it has to come from transformation, of the system. I just hit the wrong button. Can you save me? Oh, there we go, thank you. My thumb wandered. Even the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, the the financial targets, are huge, supposedly, but they're so much smaller than they need to be, in blue there. And the climate finance is so much smaller than the funding that's really needed to transform this system. So what I'm hoping that we can do is to use these sorts of framings of nature, economy, and society to really help identify what finance needs to do. One perspective is to end externalities. That's the integrated actions of the nexus assessment. Another is to repurpose nature negative flows. So there's still spending that finance in the global economy, but in nature positive ways. But the other part is about wealth and the importance of wealth. Because this is really, if you look at the real source of wealth in our global system is from nature. The commodities that have been extracted, that money is then saved, used to do other things, right? And is expanded. So wealth represents embedded or historical extraction. We need to reconvert excessively converted financial capital back into essential natural capital. There's a direct relationship between finance and natural capital. And a system model can help us to understand that. If we look at this, economic activity first evolved to transact benefits from nature, crops and so on. But money has really evolved to help make this happen. It's really grown into its own capital that really dominates the system, and we're just extracting into financial capital, and it's growing bigger and bigger and dominating the system. And what we need to work out is how to really get that financial capital back into nature in various ways. And that really needs this understanding of what this system is about overall total balance across them. I have a slide on inequality, but I'll blow through that because Laura really wants me to move forward. The main point I'll make here is that a useful rule of thumb, this is the Carbon Equality Report, is that finance is a projection of material activities as well. It's not disconnected from material footprint. If you break down carbon emissions and impacts into deciles of global population, you see how much more the top decile of global population emits in terms of carbon dioxide, but the much greater impact inequality of those in the bottom 50%. And we need transformations that redistribute sort of these impacts and causes. And this rule of thumb, it's very rough, but we need rough sort of rule of thumb things to really get politicians moving. 10, 40, 50. It's really in that middle 40% of the global population. If you look at the impact emissions, the emissions there, where if you had equality of emissions across all deciles, that's where we would be, right? So is that middle 40% really where we should be in terms of raising welfare, income, even footprint in the bottom 50%, but that needs to come from the top 10%. This is work from the Earth Commission, which I won't go into detail, but it basically also shows that it is possible to transform sort of economic drivers so that those in the bottom income levels can have a greater footprint that can be accommodated by redistributing from the top 1 to 4%. But does this 10, 40, 50 sort of relationship really give us a picture of where the goal should be in terms of an acceptable level of inequality globally? My last slide then here is just to re-emphasize, I think the sustainable development paradigms are really useful over here. The transformations need to be linked to integrated actions, really making those possible. The role of the SDGs in channeling work and synergizing, finding co-benefits. Underlying causes, addressing these three areas, and I think there's a lot in this conference around addressing those. And then these final takeaways at the bottom, as was said at the beginning, I think these Earth system sciences, the development of Earth system sciences across natural and social sciences and others are really important, I think, because they give us that integrated planetary perspective, but with an ability to really focus down at the local, the importance of localization, finding local solutions. And my last point there that around transformative change is that we don't get major positive global transformative changes out of just feeling good about things and trying to move forward well, and getting everybody to agree. The current disruptions maybe are part of what's necessary in terms of disrupting the bad things as well in the locked-in systems that we have, so we can really, the seeds of a good Anthropocene, can they emerge from the current disruption, from all the work, the great work that's being done locally, and the facilitation we can provide in our communities to help local actors actually find good ways forward. So I'll finish with that. Thanks.
I don't think there's ever been an opening plenary that didn't run over, so I'm going to steal 5 minutes of your time for a discussion. I'd like to invite sort of the panel speakers just to come up and take their seats. And then what I am going to do is ask the 3 questions from the audience that you want to pose to the panelists, and then I'm going to let them reflect on the presentations that they've heard from each other and go into a very quick conversation. So first 3 hands that I see. And if I don't see any, I have some questions, so that's fine. Yes, 1 over there. 2 over there, next door, fantastic. Anyone at the back? There, 3rd one, okay, great. So I've got this gentleman over here, and then the lady next to him, and then the back. And please comments, questions short, not soliloquies, thank you.
Hi, my name is Ian Goldman from the International Evaluation Academy. What's going to make this shift happen?
Sorry, we didn't hear that, actually.
What's going to make this shift happen?
My name is Monica Mbua. I'm with Maliasili. It's a nonprofit that supports local organizations. And my question is very closely linked to this, and it's directed towards you, David, about there's a lot that's happening and transformation that's needed at different scales. How are you seeing local voice and localization happening in this vast space?
And then there was, I'm just going to, oh, this does work. At the back, if you could just put your hand up again. There we go. And is there any chance that we might be able to dim those lights? They're really, really bright. I mean, like this level of bright. Sorry. I'm not going to lie. Do you have a mic?
My question is for Dylan. Yesterday in our workshop, you said you weren't a fan of SDGs. I'd like to know why. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. So I'm actually going to pass on to Dylan, actually, to reflect on that. And then what I really want to hear is, maybe Mpume, you have some thoughts on what you heard from David's presentation and sort of what he was showing us in terms of this broader global picture, considering you're going to be heading into to New York very soon to be grappling with these decisions. And maybe, David, just maybe a more personal reflection on from what you felt when we were all witness to Mpume's discussion. So we only have 1 mic, so Dylan, and then we'll pass on. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the SDGs, and I don't know if my brilliant teacher is in the audience, Prof. Hala Lotsa-Sitka. I know she's coming to the conference, but she always said that the SDGs will fail if there isn't, there's like poverty alleviation, but there's no SDG for wealth alleviation, and there's no demilitarization SDG. So on those 2 premises, they're still going to fail if we don't deal with those 2 things, but mainly because of time. And SDGs posit ourselves to a very Western concept of living in the future and driving towards goals and aims. But when you look at work like, as in Africa, John Mbiti, who's an anthropologist in Kenya, wrote a lot. He looked at 70 different sub-Saharan languages. And the concept of future does not exist in the same way in Africa. Neither does it in pre-colonial Africa. Neither does it in South America and Polynesia. And while we've had to adjust to kind of Western concepts of time and goals, there is this obsession with the future has kind of erased our memory and our stories and our histories and our cultural practices, which the first question was, what's going to cause the shift? I really believe that the shift will be through massive paradigm changes where we are returning back to and our stories and our memories and multiple ways of knowing and being and doing. And so, yeah, I think I'm not a fan, mainly because it still puts, especially the developing world, on this kind of racetrack towards some kind of predetermined goal, mostly determined in the global north, mostly determined on structures of positive science that comes with its own racist logics that haven't been properly dealt with. And actually, what we should be moving towards is practices, anything that supports community sovereignty and relationship building, and practices, returning to practices like Ubuntu and reciprocity. So maybe I'll just leave it at that and then hand over to David.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so two things there, I think. So I mean, I completely agree with the critiques that you have made of the SDGs, and these are there in the literature, and the failure in the SDGs is thinking that, I think, it is narrowing them down to very specific and target-oriented components. So, for example, you mentioned, so there's a SDG on poverty alleviation, so number 1. But actually, to me, SDG 1 is really about income. So both that there should not be too little income, and there should not be too much income either. And SDG 8 is about jobs and economy, SDG 8. And again, a target framed for that, given when they were negotiated in 2015, was to have very high levels of GDP growth, which is the wrong target to have. What we need to have is sustainable jobs and economy, good jobs that are beneficial for people. Whether they're making money out of those jobs or not, those jobs are very beneficial in the family, in the community, in the local and national systems. So to me, what's most important about this understanding of sustainable development and the SDGs is not the specific understanding of those from very sort of narrow thinking sort of government representatives in 2012 to 2013, 2014 for the SDGs, but that you can think of nature as a foundation of everything that we have, really. And economy is, the economy in a community setting is, or if you're living off the land, is the things you get from nature. You may give and trade with your neighbors. In a large global system or in our cities, the economy is financially based. But those are both economy. They're based on the human ecological niche and the things that we need. And then there's a lot in societal values and cultures that is completely different as well across the world. The point isn't that we all follow the same value system, but that we make space for all the value systems that we have. And the one value system that is taking up too much space does need to be brought into that sustainability framing. And the sustainable development paradigm and the goals can be ways to bring that down to enable space for others. So I think that's where the power is. And that's the science that I think in a way stopped in 2015 when we got the SDGs and we all focused on implementation. We haven't really focused on, and the IPBES science has gone forward with that integration and that sort of pluralization, understanding the plurality of perspectives, but it hasn't yet been folded back into the sustainable development literature, which I think would help a lot if it does. So then the question about, so how will this happen? I think the importance of something like the Sustainable Development Goals and coming into a global sort of role that I'm in now is that we need to have common language and framings of things for countries to agree. So that's where they really help. And the movement comes from agreeing that we commit to sustainable development, not by sort of top-down control from national systems or international aid systems, but by really enabling bottom-up identification. What does sustainability mean in this place, in this culture, by these people, how they want to do it? Of course, not everybody can do exactly what they want to do necessarily, because we're a very full planet, but we can negotiate trade-offs when we have a common language to do that. So I hope that's where we can go with, coming up to 2030 and the post-2030 framing that is much more equitable, has many more voices in it, and really understands the need for plurality, as you're saying.
Sanbonan, hello. I'm not used to sitting in panels like this. It's suddenly like, I'm used to performing. I'm used to being on stage and performing. So sitting like this is like, hey, what's happening? Okay. Yes, I am a performer, a storyteller. I didn't catch the whole presentation, but I caught a little bit at the bottom where you were talking about including indigenous communities, getting knowledge from the people of the areas, and that vibed with me. That's what we need, and in order to be able to have to live hand in hand with nature, we need to live hand in hand with nature. So. Going into New York to speak with indigenous people, to join these indigenous teams, I'm very glad that now, as you were talking about something like shifting, I feel like there is some sort of a shift that's happening. If someone like me from Umlazi is being invited to come to the United Nations to join the indigenous people and talk about our experience as storytellers, and to show that storytelling is important and decision makers need to listen to what the storytellers have to say, to what the people who are to the dreams of our people, that it's important, that also that art is able to be used in court cases so that the judges can be able to judge not only towards science but also towards art. I am a messenger, and I was very lucky to have met Dylan and Neil, who are helping me to shape the message that I've been sent to this world. My role is to share the message with you. And then you take the message. It's your response. It's a responsibility that you have to take as the people that I'm sharing the message with. What you do with it, it's up to you. So it's your responsibility. And for me, because there's someone who asked me, Mpume, how do you deal with, how do you come out of performance? Because my performances, most of them are very intense. How do you come out of there? I'm like, the minute I start performing, I'm taking it out to you. So I'm giving you all the burden, and I'm left. So I'm very happy that I'm going to be representing indigenous storytellers, especially coming from South Africa, coming from KZN, representing my ancestors, which I travel with a lot. I use a lot of my ancestors to do my performances. I do rituals with my ancestors. And yeah, what else can I say?
Well, maybe I'll just quickly add that the BB&J agreement policy, so this animation has been used as evidence in the Shell court case and in our play Lalela, alongside testimonies of fishers. But thanks to the UN Special Rapporteur, Elisa McGarry on human rights and climate change, she's helped us support a global movement where there's a story map of indigenous knowledge of the deep sea, because there was this assumption that people didn't care about the deep sea or there wasn't indigenous heritage. And it's all biocultural knowledge that's now actually entering into, through stories, through animations, through films, through performance and dance, is actually going to be included for the first time as policy interventions in this national agreement. And this is biodiversity in the deep, deep sea, which also support the Antarctic rights work, which the whole planet needs. We need the deep sea and Antarctica so it's going to offer this big biodiversity response, but through culture.
Much to the panel. I think, we started off with performance, with narrative, with storytelling, with connection. And I think we sort of also moved into what I think we're really going to be reflecting on in the conference. So that's focusing on this question of equity and justice, which is what actually matters at the end of the day, about that connection with our community, sort of grounded spaces, and what can we do? What is our responsibility as we're in these spaces and as we go forward? And this is where I would like to show the final slides that I have. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, please. My slides, thanks. Which is really just some pause for reflection, some scaffolding for us to reflect on as we move into the space. So we've thought quite deeply as as the transformations and the Earth System Governance community on what it means actually for us all to gather today for the next couple of days in this transformative space, and how we're going to have some hard conversations, probably. If we're doing transformations right, that's actually about surfacing some of these tensions, these conflicts, these honesties, these truths. And so we just wanted to emphasize, put forward some modes of thought as we move forward into our program on there's no neutral ground, really. So just to reflect on that, and that power dynamics are always going to be present. They're present on the stage right now, but we just need to acknowledge them and to acknowledge our positionality within those spaces. And through that, to create the space for honest conversations and to amplify in particular the voices of those who are often silenced or who are marginalized. I think that's really at the heart of a lot of the purpose that we have in coming together at this conference. And to also be aware of performative allyship, right? It's very nice to be able to think that, oh, I'm an ally, I'm enabling the space, I'm doing this, but to really reflect strongly on, is it just a performance? Performance in potentially the negative sense, not in what we've seen today. And so the ask really is to the delegates to opt in as much or as little as you want to with some of the spaces that we've created for the delegates, but really to try and be present with intention, to attune to those invisible power dynamics, and to make space in the conference to tap into what's beneath the surface, to get a fuller picture, to really engage deeply in conversation with each other, to see each other over the coming days. Oh, I have power. Right. And so we've got 4 sort of different spaces that we've curated. In particular, thanks so much to Andrea and Jessica, who've really put together an amazing arts and well-being theme throughout the conference. But you may have noticed that there are a few stations around the conference. There's one main one downstairs, and then there are 3 different boxes on the second floor, where the amazing team of Quinzela and Yakalo from the House of Invade have actually got us some provocative questions, and we invite you to choose one that you really want to reflect on, write a comment on the back and put it into the box. And we're going to collect these reflections and synthesize them with our facilitator, Shamila, who's somewhere in the audience today, who's going to be here at the closing plenary, just to feed some of those reflections back. There's a quiet zone, both a quiet room, but also a space where you can just go have conversations, reflect, do some yoga, breathing. It really is a space just to be present with ourselves at the conference. That's on the second floor. And then please to feel free to approach any of our designated volunteer sense makers. They have it's not a star, they have a heart on their badge, to talk through any issues, concerns, tensions. Something's uncomfortable, you want to say something's really great, you have an idea that you want to share. Please do approach them. They're there also to any of us as the conference organizers. We'd also be really willing and looking forward to engaging with you on this. And these are them. So we have Antoinette, Batalifi, Joel, Michele, Mulako, Scott, and Vanessa. So they have volunteered to act as sense makers throughout the conference. So you can take a photo. I did get permission from them to use their images for this. If you want to just see them and approach them, if anything happens during the conference that you'd like to raise, please feel free to pass it. So then, it is now most definitely coffee time. But first, if you just join me in thanking all of our speakers, from the Vice Chancellor, Mr. Kekana, David. Nkosi kakhulu.